Thank you, John. You're not supposed to clap till the end. Now, I have to add that Rick was a child genius, and I was only 16 at the time. What I'm going to do is give you a scattershot of topics about addiction, hoping to stimulate some thought and some conversation about a problem which we recognize in this country as the #1 health problem and the #3 cause of death. And yet most of us are largely uninsured for the treatment of the #1 health problem and the #3 cause of death, or we're underinsured for that. It doesn't make much sense to me. Someone once asked me, how do you solve the nation's problems? And I say, well, if you consider these statistics, and these are conservative, 50% of all of the murders, rapes, successful suicide, cases of abuse, and fatal automobile crashes involve the use, abuse, and addiction to alcohol and other drugs. I said we could solve half the problems if we could learn to recognize and treat addiction. If we can get people into treatment, we'd take a shot at half of all those kinds of problems. And yet the topic is full of myths and misconceptions, of false perceptions. Everyone in the room has a notion of what alcoholism is. And largely that's based on your perception of what an alcoholic or a drug addict is. And that's largely based on your perception of what alcohol is in the first place. So let's start there. What's this alcohol stuff? Well, you probably learned a long time ago that it's a drug, right? Everybody knows that. There's not a problem with it. If you're in school today, you learn it in 6th grade, all right? But the problem isn't what we know, it's how we perceive it. It's a perception problem, not a knowledge problem. Ask a true and false question, everybody gets it right. Alcohol is a drug, true. That's not the problem. It's a perception problem. So I'm going to play a little game with you. I'm going to say a word, and I want you to think of the first drug that comes to mind when I say this word. Ready? Overdose. Heroin, cocaine. Heroin, okay. PCP. Some people think drug. No other word comes, just the word drug somehow. The word drug. All right, you're like every audience I've ever done this with, and believe me, I've done it thousands of times. Same responses. I say overdose, they say heroin, cocaine, blah, 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 blah. How many have you ever seen eyeball to eyeball, face to face, close up and personal, a heroin overdose? One person. How many of you have seen eyeball to eyeball, face to face, close up and personal, a cocaine overdose? 4 people. How many of you ever seen a sleeping pill overdose? 2, 3, 4. How many of you ever seen eyeball to eyeball, face to face, close up and personal, an alcohol overdose? Get your hands up, all of you. Because I know you've seen. Just means overdose. Too much dose, all right? If you can't focus your eyes, you're overdosed. If you can't walk a straight line, you are overdosed. How many people have seen an overdose, alcohol overdose? Everybody. How many have seen multiple examples of alcohol overdose? How many have seen recent multiple instances of alcohol overdose? How many of you have seen them in family members, alcohol? Then why didn't you think alcohol when I said overdose? Only the drugs do. But guess what? Alcohol is a drug. And we said we knew it, but there's a difference between knowing it and perceiving it that way. So the word overdose triggers thoughts about all the other drugs, and we have virtually little experience with those, and we leave out alcohol because we think, well, you're talking about real drugs. Well, it is a real drug. Which of these 2 drugs does more harm to the human body, alcohol or heroin? No, alcohol. Alcohol does more damage to the human body than heroin. Which of these 2 withdrawals is a more dangerous withdrawal, alcohol withdrawal or heroin withdrawal? Alcohol withdrawal. Heroin withdrawal will never kill you. It's prolonged, it's painful, it's difficult, but never fatal. Heroin withdrawal cannot kill you. Alcohol withdrawal can. Okay? If you get DTs, 15% die from DTs, no matter where they are. If DTs start, 15% will die. Be it Hopkins. And if DTs start, 15 out of 100 people will die from a withdrawal from alcohol. Which of those two do we call a hard drug? Alcohol or heroin? Heroin, right? What seems harder to you, dead or diarrhea? I always thought dead would be more of a problem than diarrhea. So this notion that we have is pretty much false. When's the last time you held drug paraphernalia in your hand? Oh, never. Yes, you have. Pick up a glass. Then you've held paraphernalia, right? Believe me, alcohol paraphernalia have been around a lot longer than Coke spoons and pot bongs. I promise you that. But what are shakers, strainers, right? Stirrers, cocktail napkins. I was amazed the first day I realized that, my God, in America, we even have a cocktail dress. I thought, holy mackerel, a cocktail dress. Wow, that's the most interesting paraphernalia I think I've ever heard. What kind of alcohol would you drink from that glass? Wine. You know of the three types, which type, right? What is not only the type of alcohol, but the name of the drink? Martini. Do you know how to decorate it? How do you decorate it? You put an olive in it, except an alcoholic will tell you the olive takes up way too much room, so you should not do that. So you know the name of the drug, the name, the type of drug, the name of the drink. How many of you know the name of the glass? No? Pilsner glass. It's called a Pilsner glass. We have baptized a glass for the use. That's paraphernalia. Got it? That's paraphernalia. The word shocks us because we think that paraphernalia goes with the use of a drug, right? But that's my point. Alcohol is a drug. We know that, but we don't perceive it that way. It doesn't connect that way. We don't think drug when we say alcohol. We think of all kinds of other things. I mean, you all have an Uncle Harry story. So Harry gets drunk at a party, and what you do with Harry is you send him upstairs, loosen his belt, put him over on his stomach, I hope, not his back. You don't want him on his back. And then the party proceeds uninterrupted, right? How many of you have ever done that? Been at a party where there was a drunk upstairs sleeping it off. You wouldn't have done the same thing with him if you suspected that solid drugs were involved, would you? You'd had him at the emergency room. And yet, it's a perception issue. Alcohol is not only a drug, it's toxin. It's a poison. It's a system poison. Now, what I mean by that is not that it's like a poison, but that it is a poison. Alcohol isn't digested. All right? When you drink alcohol, the barley and the malt may be digested, but the absolute half ounce of alcohol in that beer is not digested. It's oxidized. It's, in other words, the body's depoisoner, the liver, that eliminates alcohol from your system. Okay? So alcohol is a toxin, a system poison. I once asked a pathologist who ran one of the local medical laboratories, how do I prove to people that alcohol is a toxin? And he looked at me and he thought for a minute and he said, well, tell them it'll kill them. Is that toxic enough? I said, yeah, that'll do, but it tends to scare people when you tell them that. It's not digested, it's oxidized. It's the body's depoisoner that gets rid of alcohol. Now, the reason that's important is you get somebody drunk and everybody's taking notes about what he thinks, right? Oh, we know what he thinks really now, don't we? We got him drunk. So if I were to poison you just a little bit, would I get the truth out of you, or would I get a distortion?
Probably a twisted version.
A twisted, distorted, even if it bore some semblance to to the truth, okay, at least it's coming out without the governing of the body, what Freud called the superego.